because the country, this is the Pentagon, because we've just seen a moment ago that at least one portion of one side or building at the Pentagon itself has actually collapsed. And as we warned you, the whole business of responsibility, claiming of and naming responsibility would be complicated. And now we've, from the Middle East, a senior official from the Democratic Front for the Liberation of Palestine has denied any involvement, any connection to a double plane crash on the World Trade Center. It was, in fact, earlier on an anonymous caller who had called Abu Dhabi television to say that the DFLP was responsible. So for today, we'll put aside as best we can trying to understand who did it, just knowing somebody who did it. Now, one of the planes that crashed into the World Trade Center was, as we said some while ago, American Airlines Flight 11 from Boston to Los Angeles. That has now been confirmed by the airline itself, or at least by their spokesperson, Lori Bassani. It was a Boeing 767. It would, under normal circumstances, if it were full, carry about 160 passengers, including 2 pilots, 9 or 10 crew, but we have no idea yet whether or not the plane was heavily loaded or not.
Peter, big concern now from the scene that the Northwest Tower, the one remaining standing, is leaning and buckling in the northwest corner. They're moving back the mobilization areas, and they're cordoning off the area in a much wider zone now, because obviously they are now concerned about the possibility of a second collapse.
I'm still desperately confused, John, about what may have caused the building to collapse.
As you watch the videotape, it appeared to buckle from the middle, from the point of impact and collapse, which, with no background in architecture, I don't know about the structural vulnerability, but as you see, debris starts to fall away. Then it cracks, and then it just goes straight down. And now they say that the other tower is leaning. If you look at some of the pictures, it appears to be on a slight angle to the right. Yeah, they say the fire is also spreading downward now through the tower. And I think there's a real decision to make there. I have not been able to hear whether they're keeping people in there to fight that fire, or they're just leaving it empty to let the fire burn itself out, because they're going to have a real problem with people in there if it's in jeopardy.
That a whole tower has collapsed. We're going to stick with the moment, for the moment, with a report that a portion of one of the World Trade Center towers has collapsed.
I can imagine they're going to pull out at this point.
And if the elevators are just...
And facing that danger, as we have been telling you, many
to have occurred. This occurred about 2/3 of the way up. ABC's John McWethy now confirms for us, we've had from an eyewitness, or he adds to our eyewitness, saying that a small plane heading north, which is exactly what our eyewitness a little earlier told us, exploded at the base of the Pentagon, at the base of one wing of the Pentagon. They evacuated everyone inside, and there was subsequent concern, which may have led to the FAA decision to ground everything, that there was concern that another plane might be inbound towards the Pentagon. And by grounding everything, of course, by ordering everything to be grounded on all radio channels to all aircraft that are flying in the area, it puts the military, Pierre Thomas confirmed for me, it puts the military in a position to take aggressive action, as the White House did when other aircraft had come close in the past.
Absolutely, absolutely. What it allows them to do is to get a better sense of incoming. If you're ordering everything down, you're essentially clearing the sky so the Pentagon can see what's coming in. Another question that they have to look at here is whether any of these planes might have been laced with explosives to cause the additional collateral damage once the impact occurred.
Yeah, these in every instance, well, I shouldn't say in every instance, certainly in the instance of the Pentagon, it looks more than a single aircraft just exploding on the ground. But again, we don't know precisely the size of the aircraft. We won't speculate on that. But Lisa Stark, who covers aviation for us, confirms that it was American Flight 11 to Los Angeles. There were 90 passengers and crew on board. And there was a second plane. Help me understand this, not. So we believe that the two aircraft have flown into the trade towers. Both belonged to American Airlines, and they had both been hijacked. And there were 90 passengers and crew on the first plane and 60 passengers and crew on the second plane. That is if there's any doubt about that, someone please contradict me, but that is the report I am getting from our people who cover the Federal Aviation Administration and air travel in general, that there were two aircraft hijacked for this attack on the twin trade towers, now the single trade tower in New York City. And on the first, they were both flights to the West Coast from Boston. And the first one had 90 people and a crew on board, and the second had 60 passengers and crew on board. I beg your pardon. The second plane was not hijacked from Boston, but from Dulles Airport, we're being told, which of course is outside Washington, and we do not know if that was the... I'm going to make this absolutely clear because this reporting gets muggy. We've now reports of two planes from American Airlines, one from Boston, Flight 11 to Los Angeles, which we believe is one of the aircraft that went to the trade towers. We have a second plane, American Airlines Dulles to Los Angeles, with 60 passengers and crew, and that is certainly bigger than a small commuter aircraft, so it may also have been involved in the near thing. We'll do our best to hand that down as well. Senior law enforcement officials in Washington now tell us that a car bomb has exploded outside the State Department. That's it's a report now from the Associated Press, about to confirm it with our own people at the State Department, though everybody in Washington has been evacuated from their buildings, that a car bomb has now exploded outside the State Department. And John Miller, I see you writing quite frantically on something else.
It's at the scene now at the World Trade Center. Because of the concerns of the structural stability of the remaining tower, a temporary headquarters mobilization point triage center was set up at Stuyvesant High School, which is about 2.5 blocks up and slightly across the street. Now the concern is that if the building falls, if the second building falls, that it will be falling in that direction. So they are now evacuating their own command post and triage center, and they have to find an even further zone to move that to. Something that is striking about this today is that this is indicative of, with a car bomb at the State Department, a plane crash into the Pentagon, two planes designated to crash into each tower of the World Trade Center, bringing one down. It connotes the level of planning and sophistication and extreme logistical ability that probably makes this singularly the largest, most well-coordinated act of terrorism.
Oh, yeah. Oh, there it goes, there it goes, there it goes, there it goes. Oh.
When it comes down, we're
All right. We do need to put it down now. I think we need to put it down now. Here we go.
Ladies and gentlemen,
and now the unthinkable, the second tower has just crumbled before your very eyes.
Those two buildings, 110 stories, 50 to 70,000 people work in those buildings.
They were the tallest skyscrapers in New York City, and they were really designed to be the beautiful buildings out of proportion to show off the beauty of the city. They had 3,000 workers every...
Excuse me, Tom, is down at the scene. Pat?
Where's Wing? Where's Wing? Where's Wing?
Pat, can you hear us? Obviously, there is pandemonium downtown. Pat is not far from the World Trade Center, as you can hear from the sirens, and you can only imagine the confusion and the terror that is in that area after not one but both Trade Center towers have now collapsed.
More than 100 stories of steel, concrete, electrical. Here it is. That's a videotape replay.
We are back at 10:30 Eastern Time on this Tuesday morning. This horrific, incredible not to be believed Tuesday morning. You are looking at live pictures of the World Trade Center where just a few minutes ago, within the last minute actually, the second Twin Tower collapsed. Just to recap, if you're just joining us, around 8:42 Eastern Time this morning here in New York City, a plane crashed into the right Twin Tower of the World Trade Center about 2/3 of the way up the building, leaving a huge gaping hole, a huge fire, and tons of billowing smoke. About 25 minutes later, a second jet, believed to be a 727 or a 737,
some reports of a 757 even,
then crashed in the second Twin Tower. The first plane, incidentally, was en route from Boston, Massachusetts to Los Angeles.
Here's the video, I think, of the second plane striking the tower.
That's right. We're not sure the origin of that plane, is my understanding. The first plane that caused that hole on the right-hand side in the other Twin Tower was from Boston to LAX to Los Angeles. It was Flight 11, American Airlines. We have confirmed that that plane was hijacked. What happened following the hijacking rather, is unclear. We should note that about an hour after the first collision at the Pentagon, reportedly another plane crashed into the Pentagon, which is just outside Washington, D.C. in Northern Virginia. All air traffic has been stopped.
Government buildings have been evacuated, as have other buildings across the country. The Sears Tower in Chicago was evacuated. You can imagine that other buildings in major cities and small cities around the country are probably being evacuated as well.
There's an unconfirmed report of a car bomb at the State Department. We haven't not been able to pin that down. There is also, Jim Miklashevsky was told that there was an unconfirmed report of another air hijacking. We share this with you not in an attempt to in any way exacerbate what is already a terrible situation, but so much has come true today based on these early reports that we want you to have as much information as we can possibly get. At the Pentagon, all people outside were told to take cover just moments ago, but Jim Miklashevsky said the skies were clear.
There was an unconfirmed report of another hijacking with a plane headed towards Washington. Again, we don't want to sound alarmist, right, but that is something that Mick heard while he was at the Pentagon. We also want to mention that the president is en route from Longboat Key, Florida, where he was there to visit an elementary school to talk about literacy. Obviously, clearly, his agenda has changed dramatically. He will convene a meeting of the National Security Council as soon as he gets home.
Now, can I ask where this picture is from? Do we know where this is? This is
outside the World Trade Center. The sign indicates the approach to the
Brooklyn Bridge. To the Brooklyn Bridge. So we're
on West Street, approximately just north of Vesey Street there.
And you can see the dust and debris, and this is at, I don't know if this is at an early stage or whether this is right now. It's at an early stage because there in the distance you can see at least one of the towers still standing as people wander, many of them dazed. And look at the cell phones in their ears. This is, in a cell phone society, and it's certainly true in the Middle East, people on their cell phones all the time, seeking and offering reassurance to their families and their friends that something has happened in Israel, and at least those who have them in the Palestinian territories these days.
Twin towers causing the destruction of both, happening within 20 minutes of each other. The plane crashes. They appeared, one was caught on tape. We had a clear shot of what apparently was a 737 twin-jet airliner aimed directly, not accidentally, directly at one of the World Trade Center towers. This happening 20 minutes or so after another plane had crashed into the other twin tower. And you cannot see it under that smoke, but once that smoke clears, you will not see Lower Manhattan with the twin trade centers of the World Trade Centers. They have been destroyed. They have collapsed under their own weight after the destruction which befell them earlier this morning. Once again, within Washington, also the Pentagon has been attacked. All government offices in Washington have been locked down and evacuated. We have a crew in Washington, of course, as well. They are going to be reporting.
Now being evacuated, you may be able to hear some of the sirens going off in the Pentagon. There's smoke billowing down the hallway. Eyewitnesses
describe a U.S. Air 737 plane on what seemed to be headed towards National Airport at approximately 9:40 this morning, when it then crashed into the south end of the Pentagon. The eyewitnesses describe a huge ball of fire, the plane apparently hitting by the helipad, which is near Highway 110 and Highway 395, the main arteries into the city. There have been unconfirmed reports of second explosions here at the Pentagon. We have not confirmed that, but
I'm about, I'd say, 15 to 20 blocks away. I'm at the Bowling Green subway station. I know that doesn't mean much to people who aren't from New York, but it's in the downtown area, a very popular place where a lot of commuters come in and out.
Now, obviously, listen, the most important thing is that you stay safe, John, and that you get to an area where you feel that you may be most secure. Were you able to feel the collapse of that second tower?
The second tower, no, but the first tower that went down, I was very close, I'd say about 5 blocks away. And CNBC's Ron and Sana and I were trying to hook up with the truck or find any NBC contact down there. And we were very close when that tower came down, and the debris came showering down, and Ron and I both ran for cover. I managed to get inside an alcove building, and all the scaffolding around collapsed in front of me and broke the window next to me, and I climbed inside that and stayed in there for about 10 minutes. I couldn't get out of there. It was pitch black outside. And I haven't, hold on. I'm all right.
You're okay, John?
I'm okay.
Okay.
Actually, I'm being ushered out of here right now. They're sending me inside the building.
And who is doing that? Are police on the scene?
Hello?
John, are police on the scene? Who is moving you?
It was a New York City police officer, and he's just sort of gone on his way and left me now. So I'm the only one on the street at the moment.
You're the only one on the street. Well, John, obviously get to a safe place, but
we are getting reports, and we are getting lots of reports, and we want to be careful to tell you when we have confirmed them and not. But we have a report that a 747 is down in Pennsylvania, and that remains unconfirmed at this point, and so we will check on that. I want to get back to the former commissioner in a moment, but again, to briefly recap, you have buildings in Washington now evacuated.
Who you see here are pretty much all emergency workers. Many of them that I have seen in the last 2 to 3 minutes, quite frankly, are coming out of here. And remember this, these are professionals. They're coming out of there looking literally stunned, in shock, many of them, struggling for breath, obviously in serious distress. Breathing problems are the biggest problem for those who manage to make it safely out of that area down below us. You can't see much more than a block south of me right now. And the World Trade Center probably stands about 10 blocks south of where I am at this moment. And as you can see now, the dust is beginning to pick up here. It really depends on which way the wind blows as to whether or not we get heavy dust or not. But at this point, I can tell you that in the first few minutes, emergency workers were trying just basically to get out of there, to survive. You could see that written in their faces. The situation was so desperate, they just wanted to get out of there. Now, many of them are beginning to regroup, where their commander...
Just riddled. 9 o'clock.
9 o'clock.
9 o'clock, I'm sorry. The country's just overrun, as it's inevitable it would be with rumors. I'm curious, John, in terms of the emergency operation that you monitor, are they in a sense of panic? Are they or just in a sense of chaos?
In a sense of chaos. There was a brief sense of panic, which is understandable when the first tower collapsed. By the time the second tower collapsed, they were prepared for it. There were numerous other injuries. The level of coordination is incredible. The FDR Drive, which is a main artery, has been shut down for the purpose of keeping it clear for ambulances to go to hospitals. They've anticipated that the lower Manhattan hospitals in New York City will fill up, so they have started to arrange helicopter flights to go to hospitals further out in the circle.
And that they're upset, they're feeling
back on our country. I have spoken to the Vice President, to the Governor of New York, to the Director of the FBI, and have ordered that the full resources of the federal government go to help the victims and their families, and to conduct a full-scale investigation to hunt down and to find those folks who committed this act. Terrorism against our nation will not stand. And now, if you join me in a moment of silence.
The group responsible for that terrorism is possibly a group called the Democratic Front for the Liberation of Palestine. Osama bin Laden, of course, is a terrorist leader that many suspect has been the mastermind of other terrorist attacks all across the country. And again today, there is already talk that possibly he was the mastermind behind what has tragically been unfolding before our very eyes live this morning.
That organization, which apparently is claiming credit, is an offshoot of the Palestine Liberation Organization, but Yasser Arafat, we're told, has denounced these attacks and has said that the PLO had no responsibility. Let's go back to live coverage now from CNN.
I was not able to distinguish between an explosion and the collapse. We were several hundred yards away, but we clearly saw the building come down. I heard your report of a fourth explosion. I can't confirm that, but we heard some boom, and then the building fold in on itself.
We are told, Brian, hang on, we're told that the Secretary of Defense is being evacuated from the Pentagon. The Pentagon, a portion of the Pentagon has collapsed after, and I'm not precisely sure on this, and I want to tell you when I'm not precisely sure, but apparently a plane or helicopter hit part of the Pentagon itself. As you take a look at the pictures there, I must say every time we hear a plane coming up overhead, it gets a little nervous where we are. Whatever is happening and whoever is responsible, we have no way of knowing if it's played out yet or if it's just going on. So every time we hear a plane go by, we wonder what the situation is and where it is headed. That sound, we're told by a person here, they believe that is a fighter jet. Federal office buildings around the country, is that correct? All over the country have been closed, or just in Washington?
Well, we were not allowed into...
All right, these are live pictures and reaction in both Washington, D.C. and New York City as the high alert continues, and quite frankly, a lot of fear and concerns are being raised this morning, as well as here in North Texas. Cindy Morris is on the phone, the VP for marketing there at the Dallas World Trade Center. And I understand, Cindy, that you're encouraging exhibitors and buyers to evacuate the building as a precaution today?
Yes, we are. We have not received any threats. However, with the name recognition with the buildings, we are encouraging both our buyers and exhibitors to evacuate.
So it's not mandatory, but you're saying that it might be a good idea?
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. Tell me what, and undoubtedly the word has spread there, and anybody who's got a TV set or a radio has grabbed one. Tell me what's going on there at the building.
Well, actually, it's been very calming. We have people coming in, buyers coming into the building, as well as the exhibitors. And although the building here is a completely different use from that building in New York, there is the name recognition, and I think just in the area of safety and precautionary measures.
16 flew very low level, did a wide sweeping turn around the Pentagon and back over Washington. And as one Air Force officer standing near me said, "My God, they're now flying air cover over Washington." A very dramatic moment, a milestone in what Tom has already described as a declaration of war, terrorist war against the U.S.
Let's go back and show you the pictures of Lower Manhattan, where the situation only gets worse, not better. That is the financial district of the world. It's also a residential area and a great commercial area. Both Twin Trade Tower buildings now have collapsed onto the ground. There is an untold loss of life. The ripple effect goes on with all the smoke and dust that is spread out across that very densely populated area. It goes down below ground as well as in the high-rise buildings there. There are many residential structures in that area as well. Some heroic rescue workers were down there trying to get people out of the building when the first building came down, and then the second building did as well. Without any sound, and looking at this, there is a kind of a surreal quality. but that is the epicenter of a great, great national tragedy and a great loss of life. No question about it this morning.
We're talking about people who were hurt, perhaps killed in this blast. Many of them have been brought to area hospitals, including St. Vincent's Hospital. Bob Bazell is there. Bob, what's the latest?
Well, Katie, ambulances continue to stream in. Several New York City streets have been closed. Major avenues have been closed off so that ambulances can continue to come in. In addition, the New York City subway system has now been closed down, and several buildings that were not involved in the World Trade Center area have been shut down, and people have been told to go home, but a lot of them are just wandering aimlessly on the street. Many people openly weeping and hugging each other. This is clearly is a time that, as Tom described, is very close to the beginning of a war, and but the casualties do keep coming in. Burns, smoke inhalation, very severe, and again, all the medical people that I've talked to say this is just the tip of the iceberg. We expect casualties to be coming in all through the night and way into tomorrow and beyond.
Bob, if you could just stand by for a moment, because we have this report from AP that I'm just simply going to read. A large plane crashed Tuesday morning just north of the Somerset County Airport, about 80 miles southeast of Pittsburgh. Airport officials said the plane, believed to be a Boeing 767, crashed around 10 a.m. about 8 miles east of Jennerstown. According to County 911 dispatchers, WPXI-TV reported. The crash came the same morning that terrorists crashed 2 planes into the World Trade Center in New York City, and the twin 110-story towers collapsed. Explosions also rocked the Pentagon and the State Department, although that was refuted moments ago, and spread fear across the nation. There was no other immediate details on the Pennsylvania crash, and it was not clear whether the crash was related to the others. Again, that was a report.
What to do, no one's even speaking.
And again, for people, Kitty, thank you, not familiar with New York, Kennedy is the major airport handling international flights into the city. It is also an enormous complex of 7 or 8 or 9 terminals.
That's exactly right. And in fact, the baggage has been unloaded into a separate terminal from where I am, and they're asking people to walk over, pick up.
At the major U.S. exchanges today. They will not open today. Maria Bartiromo, however, has been in the financial district all morning. She's now live at the New York Stock Exchange. Maria, we'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, Sue. Well, basically, clearly the city has come to a halt in New York. I am on Wall Street. I have been down here and witnessed 2 of the explosions. Now, the first explosion that I witnessed was the second plane going into the second tower. I was outside. Frankly, I ran for my life. It was like a movie, a plane going right into the top of the World Trade Center, the second tower. The whole Wall Street area, Broadway, Wall Street, Broad Street, was filled with people. Everyone just ran. There was a lot of debris coming at all of us. In fact,
all the way down as far as they can get from Canal to the area of where both buildings once stood. Joining me here is Tito Castellanos. He was inside the building at the time of the explosion. Chris, I'm going to let him explain to you what he saw, what he experienced.
Hello.
Hi, what can you tell us about where you were and what you saw and heard?
I was at the subway station, and my ticket stub says 8:45 a.m. And as I was waiting for the train to come, we heard the explosion. A lot of debris fell on us, like dust type of particles and stuff like that. And then automatically they started to tell us to evacuate through another exit. So finally we were able to get out. We come to the sidewalk on the scene there. I saw a lot of debris and smoke on the street and sidewalk, and the cops on the other side of the street were telling us to hold on because there was still a lot of debris falling from the building that was burning, actually. As all this rain of bricks and glass and stuff that was coming down stopped, we were told to go on, but the people behind us were panicking, and they started to push us into the street. Finally, I got to the corner of the street, and I looked up, and that's when the second airplane, I saw it coming on the horizon and make like a small nosedive, and boom, hit the second building, the one that's facing the south part. Anyway, at that moment, everybody panicked, started to run away. I was under a debris of hot metals. Excuse me. I was in the building because I was driving a friend. Now I'm worried for her safety. She works in the U.S. Customs. I'm praying for her to be all right. I was injured in my leg, and I had my hip almost dislocated because I had a hip replacement a year ago. So I'm sorry, I'm pretty shaky right now. Chris, this is Rick. That's just one of many stories as people come by us here, all of them telling us their stories of the people that they know that are inside the building, people that they fear are trapped inside the building. And I would say that of every 20 people that walks by, one of them has some type of injury, be it a small injury, a bandage, they're wrapped, they're holding their eyes, they're holding their head. So many thousands of people are out in this area today that have been affected by that story. Tito Castellanos, just one of them.
And he mentioned that he was injured in the leg, although obviously that injury not life-threatening.
I'm looking at his injury right now. It seems to be more of some kind of cut. It's not a large laceration, just a cut on his leg, somewhere between his ankle and his knee.
What have you been able to see?
Up the street. There's an incredible amount of panic down here in downtown Manhattan as people are realizing that they really need to leave the area entirely after spending the last hour or so just watching this from afar.
Rose, stay with us. Terrific work. Let me throw another couple of pieces of information out as we continue to put this all together into a straight line if we can. The United Nations has been evacuated. The United Nations building on the east side of Manhattan has been evacuated. The city is in, this is election day, a primary election for mayor and city council races here in New York. That election has been postponed until further notice. Obviously, we are in the middle of an extraordinary catastrophe that started about 8:45 Eastern Time here in New York when one plane crashed into one of the towers of the World Trade Center. About a half an hour after that, as people were converging, as fire and police and rescue teams were converging on the scene, a second plane appeared to the west of the Trade Center buildings and slammed into the second tower. That's what you just saw. Fire shooting out the north and east side of the tower. Shortly after that, we began to get reports of events taking place in Washington. An explosion which first came to us as a fire at the Pentagon. Now there's a report of a second hijacked plane heading towards the Pentagon. It is believed that one of the planes, perhaps both, but one of them we have been told was an American Airlines 767 that hit one of the Trade Center towers. About a half an hour after that, perhaps a little bit longer, lose track of time a little bit in these situations, the first tower, or let me correct that, the south tower, the second tower, the one to the left, collapsed. It collapsed in a cascade of smoke and spark, and what we cannot tell you is if there was a second explosion that caused that collapse or if it was simply, that's the first one, that's the south tower collapsing, and that was about a half hour, give or take, after the planes hit the tower. Then shortly after that, just as the smoke was starting to clear away, the second tower, and that's what you're looking at now. Again, this was not very long ago, 10, 15 minutes ago. The second tower, it almost looks like one of those implosions of buildings that you see, except there is nothing controlled about this. This is devastation. How many people? There are 50,000 people who normally go to work in the Trade Center buildings. How many of those people had arrived already? How many of those people were trapped on the upper stories? How many of those people have been hurt? How many of those people died? We cannot tell you now. We can tell you that hospitals throughout the New York area are receiving literally hundreds of patients, and they are performing triage. They are trying to figure out who could be treated, who needs help first. This is sort of standard operating procedure. We are just being told now that Israel has evacuated all its diplomatic missions around the world. Israel has evacuated its missions. We are told now that Yasser Arafat has condemned these attacks, and we don't know yet who's behind them. Britain has condemned these attacks. Germany has convened its National Security Council, and we will check and see if events are going on in those places or if that is simply a reaction to what has gone on here in Washington and in New York. CNN's Gene Meserve joins us on the phone from Washington. Gene.
Hay Street, which is one of the major thoroughfares here in Washington, it is absolute gridlock. It takes about 15 minutes to drive one block. Ordinarily, this time of day, there'd be nothing near this kind of traffic. You see pedestrians filling the sidewalks, many of the businesses and offices here having closed.
The producer I'm working with, we had to break down a window just to breathe and just to escape the black cloud of glass and debris and dust. There were a couple of other people, two New York City police officers who were directly behind us, banging on the window to get in as well. We let them in, and because there were double door glass, but even two doors of glass, there was still horrible debris. And the police officer who came in behind us, we didn't even know he was a police officer because he was so covered in this debris and this dust. And I myself, I'm completely gray from head to toe. It's really eerie seeing the people who got caught in that blast because everyone looks like a ghost. And the streets it's like Mount St. Helens. The streets are covered in about an inch of this gray dust and ripped papers and shreds of charred glass. And a lot of people are sort of milling about trying to connect, with payphones on the corners, but the payphones aren't working either. At this point, most of the emergency crews who are responding aren't able to really deal with any of the direct pedestrians in the area, which is incredible because this is one of the most dangerous areas right now, considering that those two buildings have collapsed. They were looking at sewers, watching for bombs. It's an incredibly dangerous area to be in, and yet they can't respond to that essence of this crisis because there's just so much more going on at the World Trade Centers. It is truly an unbelievable tragedy down here in Lower Manhattan.
Ashley, we appreciate the report. The most important thing, of course, is that you get to an area where you can feel that you are safe. So, keep in touch with us as you can, but the most important priority is that you stay safe for us.
What most people have said, Chris, is that they don't feel safe anywhere at this point.
And that, sadly, is understandable. You are watching continuing NBC News coverage on MSNBC, a horrific sequence of destruction, terrorism reigning.
I've got just a little rundown here, if I can, Matt, for just a moment about what's going on around the country. The State Department officials have been moved into the State Department.
Witnesses say
Center in downtown Minneapolis, tallest building, evacuated. Georgia, all flights at Hartsfield Atlanta International Airport closed. The
alienated groups, terrorist groups that wanted to punish the United States, certainly they should have. But I don't think anyone anticipated that any of the groups could have done this kind of coordinated, synchronized terrorist events.
Yeah, I want to know more about that, Vincent. I don't mean to have you to defend the intelligence community, but we hear this all the time. Groups are not sophisticated to do this. Did the intelligence community
possibly concerned about fellow employees or loved ones? It's certainly, though, a very busy
area. The Pentagon continues to monitor reports that another plane, a hijacked plane, is headed for that area. All flights have been canceled around the country. International flights heading towards the United States are being diverted into Canada this morning. Patty, let me go back to you as we look at some tape from the ground. Patty, why don't you go ahead and continue?
Okay, Aaron, I'm in the main building of Pace University, which is inside the fallout zone of all the debris from the two building collapses. At the time of the first building collapse, I was at Broadway and Park Place. There was a huge cloud of smoke. It overcame the crowd. People were stampeding. Literally, the debris was so thick you could not see your hand in front of your face. I ducked around into a building that was on Park Place and Beekman Street. When I was in there, people were coming in, they were crying, they were wailing. You couldn't see anything outside. After the smoke had cleared a little bit, I came outside. The scene was like a ghost town in the financial district, very eerie. You saw people being wheeled on gurneys away from the site of the explosion. People were coming out with masks over their face, anything they could put over their face, because the air was still very thick with debris. The ash on the ground is at least 2 inches thick. It's more like snow cover, a very eerie snow cover blanketing downtown Manhattan right now. Now, at the time, I was back on the corner again of Broadway and Park Place. At that time, the police started running toward us, telling everybody to move who was left on the street. I looked up, and that's when I heard the, pardon me, that's when I heard the explosion. That's when the second tower came down. Again, whoever was left on the street started stampeding. I'm in the office. Right now, I'm in the main building of Pace University. People are crying. They have gas masks on their face. Authorities are making people go toward the basement. They're just doing anything that they can to move people away from the financial district. But again, it is a very horrifying scene down here, very eerie, like a ghost town.
Patty, let me interrupt you. Mayor Giuliani is on the telephone, is part of New York One's coverage. We join our affiliate for that.
Mayor Giuliani, since we have New Yorkers listening, and obviously their thoughts are with the people who are down there.
Urge them to remain calm, to remain at home, or to remain at their place of business, unless they're in Lower Manhattan. By that I mean south of Canal Street. If you're south of Canal Street, get out, walk, and walk slowly, carefully. There are plenty of police around, but just walk directly. If you can't figure out what else to do, just walk directly north. That'll get you out of the dangerous smoke area. It'll also do us a big favor. It'll open up those streets, because we're going to be moving a large number of ambulances and emergency personnel in and out of there all day. I've talked to the governor. He is putting the National Guard on alert so that they can relieve our police officers and our firefighters later this afternoon. And we've asked the federal government for help from the urban search and rescue team. So right now, we're using all of our police and firefighters and emergency personnel to help the people down there. Later on, we're probably going to need reinforcements.
Mayor Giuliani, I realize that it must be more than a chaotic situation, particularly since the bunker has been compromised and cordoned off. But can you give us any sense? There are so many people watching now who must have loved ones down in that area and are concerned of the systematic...
My heart goes out to them. I've never seen anything like this. I was there from shortly after it happened and saw people jumping out of the World Trade Center. It's a horrible, horrible situation. And all that I can tell them is that every resource that we have is attempting to rescue as many people as possible. And the end result is going to be some horrendous number of lives lost. I don't think we know yet. But right now, we have to just focus on saving as many people as possible.
Can you give us a sense of, if there is in fact some system being implemented, what that system is and where people...
Los Angeles is on a state of tactical alert. San Francisco, pretty much the same thing. In Virginia, Navy installations are under an increased security condition called Threat Con Charlie. In New Jersey, once again, the bridges and tunnels into Manhattan are closed. Again, to recap, let's take a look at what you are seeing there in the live pictures on your screen. The World Trade Center is now essentially gone. The Twin Towers were struck earlier this morning in coordinated attacks. We had a report of a jetliner smashing into the first tower. Here comes a replay video of a second plane that smashed into the second tower about midway shortly after 9 a.m. this morning, Eastern Time. That tremendous fireball, you can imagine, triggered a fire inside the building that apparently weakened the structural elements to the point that the upper level of the building simply could not stand. It collapsed, and there again, this is a replay of the second plane smashing into the World Trade Center. It happened as we were on the air live shortly after 9 o'clock this morning Eastern Time. Now, both towers went up in flames, and there was clearly a tremendous loss of life, but then came the catastrophic collapse. This, the second collapse of the tower that was actually struck by the first plane. All right, I'm told that that is the first collapse, but no, that was the tower with the tower, the television tower on top was the second one to go down. You can see the glass, the debris raining down, and imagine, folks, that firefighters and police officers were all around the base of that building trying to evacuate people as it came down. I can't think of a more catastrophic collapse. On top of that, we just heard from David Schuster, the Pentagon has been under attack. American Airlines is going to be holding a press conference about 25 minutes from now in Dallas to talk about one of the planes that was apparently involved in this World Trade Center collapse. We believe, well, in fact, American Airlines has told us that their Flight 11 from Boston to Los Angeles was hijacked this morning, and we believe that the hijackers somehow then commandeered the cockpit controls and flew that American Airlines plane into the World Trade Center. That would probably be, we don't have confirmation, but probably be the first one that hit.
I think, John, if I can interrupt just, I think investigators now are probably looking to see how the hijackers in this coordinated attack were able to take over the controls. Did they shoot the pilots and then jump in the seats? What happened? Osama bin Laden, sources have told me, has had pilots on his payroll. We have 3 pilots that were accused of being conspirators in the East African Embassy bombing trial here in New York City. So you certainly have perhaps investigators looking at a base of operation out of Boston and perhaps out of Pittsburgh, since you have a U.S. airplane into the Pentagon, which their main hub is Pittsburgh, and another crash outside of Pittsburgh.
Bill Daley, a former investigator for the FBI, has been good enough to stay with us. Bill, a couple of brief thoughts.
Yeah, John.
We have a report here that Osama bin Laden, who is often identified as the world's leading terrorist, warned 3 weeks ago that he and his followers would carry out an unprecedented attack on U.S. interests for its support of Israel. An Arab journalist with access said to him Tuesday in London.
Abdel Bari Atwan, editor of the London-based Al-Qud Al-Arabi newspaper, said Islamic fundamentalists led by bin Laden was almost certainly behind the attack of the World Trade Center in New York. Quote, it's most likely the work of Islamic fundamentalists. Osama bin Laden warned 3 weeks ago that he would attack American interest in an unprecedented attack, a very big one, Atwan told Reuters.
He has interviewed bin Laden, and he maintains close contact with his followers, according to Reuters. So that's the first report that we've had that Osama bin Laden may have been responsible. Obviously, it was a very sophisticated organization, carefully coordinated. It had to have its origins in this country. Louis Freeh, the FBI director, as he left office, said that his continuing great concern
appointments, lives, meetings, all of the other things that are part of the daily existence are going to have to be, in effect, suspended until we get more information and can mount the proper response.
Now, Secretary Kasperger, we are now getting reports of a horrendous number. It's the only way we can describe the casualties at this point.
It's absolutely. It's completely unbelievable, because those buildings are fully occupied, and there was no time for anyone really to escape. It's beyond belief.
I don't know if you saw the actual collapse, but both buildings, as we hasten to remind our viewers, and we wish we didn't have to, but as you can see the smoke over Manhattan, you will not see one of the landmarks that has stayed up since it was built in the 60s and 70s. Right. The World Trade Center simply no longer exists. The Twin Towers collapsed in themselves after being struck approximately 2 hours ago. But Caspar Weinberger, we thank you very much, former Secretary of Defense, excuse me, under President Ronald Reagan, commenting on the state of lockdown that is happening not only in New York, not only in the northeast quadrant of the U.S., but all over the United States because of this dastardly terrorist attack that can only be compared to, as Caspar Weinberger just did, the attack on Pearl Harbor back in December of 1941. Of course, the point there was that we had a nation that we could blame for that attack. In this particular case, as of yet, we do not have a particular nation to blame for this awful, awful attack, causing a, quote, horrendous, according to law enforcement officials in New York, loss of life. The only words they can use are adjectives. The specifics undoubtedly will come after hours, perhaps days, once the debris and destruction is cleared from that area of lower Manhattan. This, again, perhaps the most
monstrous attack, expressed his solidarity with the American people. France has just learned of these monstrous attacks. He says there is no other word for it. And Palestinian leader Yasser Arafat and his top aides are following the events from his seaside offices in Gaza City. He says, I send my condolences to the president, the government, and the people for this terrible incident.
And we are now getting this bulletin. Canada has shut down all of its airports, according to the transport minister. And that following the shutdown of all flights in America and international flights coming to America being diverted to Canada. There you see the map of the United States. Normally, it would be absolutely covered with blue dots representing the planes in the air. Now it is nearly empty. We're going to go to the New York area. There you see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 planes, it looks as though, that have yet to land. All planes are being halted. Airports across America, a great many of them are being closed. It has been a scene of nightmare. People on fire, jumping in terror from the trade towers, the World Trade Center, just before the buildings collapsed. You're watching NBC News coverage on MSNBC.
And the impact continuing to be felt from coast to coast as America continues to be under threat of terrorist attacks. All federal buildings, we are now learning, in West Virginia, in Maryland, in Pennsylvania, and in Delaware are closed in response to what is happening around the country. Again, in Dallas, offices evacuated. In Florida, Jeb Bush has closed the Capitol and canceled meetings with his cabinet. And from Mayor Rudy Giuliani in New York City, the site of the first 2 terrorist attacks, he says, I have a sense it's a horrendous number of lives lost. Right now, we have to focus on saving as many lives as possible.
And there you see the live scene very close to the collapse of the World Trade Center. NBC's Pat Dawson has been reporting there all morning long. Here's a quote from a fire marshal who was there when the Twin Towers collapsed. Everybody was screaming, crying, running, cops, people, firefighters, everyone. It was like a war zone. There are many injured and many dead. Let's go to Ashley Banfield, who joins us live on the telephone, who is there. Ashley, tell us what you've seen and heard.
There's just been another explosion, and as happened with the last 2, it may be a car bomb. That's what we were hearing from passing police officers. The last 2 were thought to be car bombs. This third one, I haven't had any confirmation on it yet, but there is, I mean, the plumes of smoke have been so thick anyway. There are more plumes coming from that area. It's pitch black down street through 7th Avenue and into where the World Trade Center has once stood. People are collecting all over here. Police are trying to disperse people, but it's not working. There's just hundreds of people milling about wondering what is going on. I can see another plume sort of headed my way. Sorry, excuse me. It's pretty hard to get any information right now, as you can imagine, because obviously a lot of these emergency crews are in jeopardy as well. They're the ones who've gone closest to where this has all happened.
Ashley, stand by. Let me jump in and go to NBC's Pat Dawson at the World Trade Center.
Come back here, come back here.
Insight into what's going on there. This is Chief William Hall of the Port Authority Police of New York. As we told you earlier, the Port Authority Police have jurisdiction over the Trade Center. And also Alan Rice, who's the director of the World Trade Center. Gentlemen, if I get you just to stand like that. First of all, Chief, do we have any idea of how many people are in there?
We have no idea. Now, as you know, it was pretty much rush hour time that this took place this morning, so the numbers we don't know yet. We tried to get almost everybody out that we could early on.
After the first 2 crashes, when the planes hit the building, there was roughly about, I would say, what, an hour and 15 minutes between that and the point where the South Tower collapsed.
Give or take.
How many people you were able to get out? Do you have any idea?
We don't know. We tried to do a floor-by-floor search. New York City Police, the Fire Department, Port Authority Police, best they could, tried to get everybody out. But as you know, there were people still coming out after that building came down.
Do you have any idea how many people would normally be in the building at 8:30 or north? This is the director of the
There are probably 10,000 people in each tower. 10,000 people in each tower would typically be in there on a normal business day. And we get about another 5,000 visitors during the course of the entire day. So by 8:30, 9 o'clock, the building should have been full.
So in other words, by 8:30 to 9, you figure the building would have been approaching full capacity with the workers. So we are.
But they have been ordered. This is the first time in U.S. history that they have ordered a ground alert, told all the planes that they need to reach their destinations. In addition to this, all international flights are being ordered to Canada, but we are told just a few months ago, an FAA...
Obviously, heavy casualties at the Pentagon. There have been ambulances and helicopters coming and going for the last hour. The area has been cordoned off. The skies above the Pentagon, there have been F-16s circling. The entire area has been evacuated. More than 20,000 people work in the Pentagon, Peter, and this is a disaster.
John, at ground level, for example, in the side of the building where the plane penetrated from the outer ring to the inner ring, do you know precisely what goes on in that section of the building?
I do not, Peter. That is not where the highest-ranking people are. The Secretary of Defense and most of the chiefs of the services are on a different side of the building, but in a way, it almost doesn't matter. There are going to be many high-ranking people from the Defense Department who are going to be either injured or killed in this attack.
And, John, is this something which the Pentagon is trying to take care of wholly itself? I mean, are we talking to you about a circumscribed military operation to emerge from this chaos?
It's very difficult, Peter. The FBI is here, local police are here.
Mental health team. Anita, thank you. I want to take you back to Love Field this morning, a live picture. Southwest Airlines, of course, based at Love Field, and tells us this morning that none of its planes whatsoever
doesn't occur. How is the Pentagon defended in any way?
The right, and you can see it coming behind the first tower, and then it hits the tower, and you'll see the flame and smoke coming out, I guess 3/4, maybe a little more, up the tower. That's where this all began. About a half an hour after that, the first of that tower that is now, you see in flame there in your shot, collapsed. The top collapsed. And there was an enormous, I don't want to say explosion, but there was an enormous plume of smoke, sparks, as we looked over from where we're standing. And then a little bit after that, and I want to be careful on time because it seemed perhaps 10 or so minutes, but I'm not sure. The second tower, which in fact was the first one hit, collapsed as well, and that's what you're about to see. Our reporters in the area say they heard loud noises when that happened. It is unclear to them and to us whether those were explosions going on in the building or if that was simply the sound of the collapse of the buildings as they collapsed, making these huge noises as they came down. But as we look back, the smoke now, which has gone from white to a kind of gray, clearing away, we are, I guess, Jeff, I want to know what's behind the smoke, but I have the worst feeling is that very little.
And the fact is that we've already been hearing from even the fragmentary reports from people on the ground, stories beyond horror, people jumping out of windows because of the flames. The fact that this happened shortly before 9 and then the second hit shortly after 9 means that most of the people were either right in the vicinity or actually at their desks. So one doesn't want to be overly grim, but the fact is there were thousands of people were in these two buildings.
And again, 50,000 people come to work in those buildings. Many thousands more pass through those buildings every day. There are retail shops on the lower floors of the Trade Center.
It is where the PATH trains from New Jersey come in.
Correct. The trains, the commuter trains coming from the other side of the river from New Jersey come in and drop off and pick up their passengers. So it is an extraordinarily busy area. It is also an area, for a number of reasons, rich in symbolism to this city and to the country.
Passed me down this area, and I walked with him as he was talking on the cell phone. I said, "What was it?" And he said, "Car bomb." And when I asked him to elaborate, he said, "No time, no time." And he continued to walk forward. The concern is that there are so many emergency so many emergency vehicles and emergency personnel that went down into that World Trade Center area, obviously cordoning it off and trying to keep people out of there. But clearly they would have been right in that path of not only the falling debris, but also that incredible, powerful cloud that just engulfed us. And I think if you heard me earlier, I told you the only way for us to escape it at the time was to break down the entrance to an apartment building just off the street. We had to break through the glass and get in through the second door to breathe. We were followed by a police officer as well who was struggling to breathe, and then a security guard who worked in the World Trade Center as well. And he had been trying to walk northward away from that mess behind us. Could you just clear back so that the camera can take a view down there? Thanks. You can shoot down and you can see some of the activity while I'm reporting this to you. We also were able to interview a security guard who was working on the concourse in the plaza between the two World Trade Centers when the first explosion happened, when the first plane hit the first tower. He said he was dispatched down to the concourse to clear people away and to try to move people out of the World Trade Center. And then he said that's when the second explosion happened, which of course was the second tower. He said everything went pitch black. There was a cloud of smoke and a cloud of debris. When we happened upon him, it was extremely strange. He was all dressed in his black security uniform, but he was fully covered from head to toe in gray and wandering aimlessly. He said he was okay.
Hold on
we asked him if he'd
second,
been
actually,
attended
if you
to.
can, because Pat Dawson, who is not far from you, is being asked to move.
All right, Tom, we've just been told we're being evacuated. You can see all the emergency workers walking north on the West Side Highway in New York. We've been told by firefighters here that there is a report of a bomb in this building. This is a school, a high school right here. And as you can see, they're moving everybody away from this building. They've said that there's a bomb in the building. They are evacuating us north now. That is according to firefighters on the scene. And we're going to move out of here right now just to keep ourselves safe. So we're going to start walking north ourselves. But that's what we're being told by New York City firefighters here, that there were reports of a bomb in that high school right there. It's called Stuyvesant High School. And so we are walking north to get out of the way. You can see just to my left here, these are even the ambulances which were down there are being moved north. The firefighters are being moved north. Everybody is being moved north. We're being asked by the police now to go north and get out of the way. Officer, do you have any idea of what the problem is?
There's a report of a secondary device possibly in the area of this school, so they're going to move everybody back as a precaution.
Secondary device meaning a bomb?
Possibly.
Okay, and where did that report come from? Was it called in?
It came in over our radios, and it's reported through our supervisors on down, so we're pulling everybody back.
And that's in the Stuyvesant High School right there?
Yes.
Okay, thank you very much, Officer McQuaid. That's Officer McQuaid of New York City Emergency Service. I'm sorry, what's it? Yeah, well, I don't think there was anyone in the school, Katie, this morning. At this point, I think everybody had been evacuated from here probably when the first events took place early this morning, just because of the fact that it's so close to the World Trade Center. Most of these buildings around here have been evacuated, so I would imagine, I never saw any kids going into that school this morning, so I'm going to presume that they never even allowed them to get to school this morning, and that anywhere that were here at 8:45 were probably moved out almost within moments after this the crash took place, because it literally is only about 10 blocks north of here, and I haven't seen any students coming in or out. Katie, Tom.
All right, that's Pat Dawson outside the Trade Center as they get moved back because of fears of another explosion. We want to catch you up to date now with the airplane situation. Airplanes apparently were used in these attacks today, commercial jetliners. And I want to remind you, you're watching NBC News coverage here on MSNBC. An FBI spokesman says the planes involved 2 American flights. American Flight 11, Boston to Los Angeles, involved in hitting one of the trade towers. Also, American 77 was involved apparently in one of the attacks, at least was hijacked. We don't know where that plane ended up. 2 United airplanes, United 175, that was scheduled Boston to Los Angeles. I just checked United's website. That plane supposedly left Boston at 8:14 this morning Eastern Time. Also United 93 from Newark to San Francisco. According to the United website, that plane left at 8:42. We do not know, except with American 11, exactly which plane ended up where. But according to this source from the FBI, those are the 4 commercial planes that have been involved in what is going on today. Now, we have been reporting another plane down some distance from Pittsburgh today. According to reports, and I want to stress this is coming from the affiliate there who got this from the scanner, so let's put this in perspective. But that plane believed it originated in Chicago and was headed to Cleveland with 90 people on board. No word on the airline. And I'm just seeing, crossing the Associated Press wires now, American Airlines says it has lost 2 aircraft carrying a total of 156 people. Just crossing of the Associated Press, American Airlines confirming 2 of its airplanes involved, a total of 156 people on board. Rick Sanchez is in Lower Manhattan. Rick?
Yeah, there have been, Lester, am I on? Is that you?
Yeah, Rick, go ahead. Lester.
Yeah, Lester, there have been about four explosions here since about 11 o'clock. The most recent about 2 minutes ago that seemed to shake the ground that we're on. We're about a block and a half away from what used to be the World Trade Center. The area is completely surrounded in soot and ash. Firefighters and rescue officials are still really trying to get their act together. They're not quite sure how to approach this situation. They just did finally set up a command center. It's going to be set up at Chambers and West. They also have a triage center set up. That's at the local high school here, Stuyvesant High School, which is, as you know, not far from the World Trade Center. And there are still people in this area who are doing everything they possibly can.
Rick, I just want to stop you there. As the information's coming fast and furious, that's the same high school that we've just been reporting is apparently being evacuated for fears of a secondary device, another device. So even as you're reporting that, things are moving fast and furious. It's got to be incredibly difficult to figure out where safe ground is right now.
Well, we've been told, as a matter of fact, moments ago to try and get out of this area because they're moving everyone out. And their fear is, of course, that there are gas leaks, natural gas in this area that either fed into or out of the buildings that have exploded. And now those lines are open and may rupture. We're not positive and can't confirm exactly what has caused those 4 explosions we told you about at the beginning of our report. But there is reason to believe that they may be caused by some type of gas explosion or natural gas leaks in this area, and firefighters are extremely cautious as they try and work into the area. What they're doing now, Lester, is lining up on some of the adjacent streets and setting up, as what you know from covering stories like this, field forces, where they tell them, don't go out and freelance, don't go out on your own. Stay in a group, we'll move into an area, and we'll somehow move in little by little. Meanwhile, firefighters and rescue officials, I just saw them come in as well,
Room 55,
and they
please.
had what appeared to be picks, axes, and other devices that they're going to be using perhaps to try and extricate people that might still be in there. The items that they had were handheld items that they were probably going to be using, we would assume, in some form to get into the area. However, at this point, we're only about a block away, and it does not appear that they're moving into the area.
Rick, I'm going to interrupt you here as we get new pictures in. These pictures from Washington, I believe it's tape or live. This is taped just a short time ago. This is the best look we've had at the damage at the Pentagon, where another plane apparently made a suicide plunge or was driven into a suicide plunge. There's the Capitol in the background. This just across the river in Virginia. The Pentagon struck sometime after 9 o'clock this morning as well. And again, this is tape of efforts to fight the fire there at the Pentagon. This following the 2 attacks earlier.
Any one of the other many correspondents, producers and others with CNN and our colleagues at the other news networks. And I would just remind you that CNN right now has producers, correspondents all around the world who are watching for any more information that we can bring you at this point. As Aaron and Jeff Greenfield have been saying in the last few minutes, everything we have right now is fragmentary. We are simply reporting to you what we are learning from police, from the federal government, from the CIA, from David Ensor, from our other correspondents.
Prayers go out to the families of all involved. One other thing, customers who wish to receive information about relatives, if you have
ritual of reciting that somebody had claimed responsibility, someone had denied responsibilities, the Palestinian Authority in the person of Yasser Arafat was very quick to come along and offer condolences to the people of the United States. To put as much distance between himself, because he gets blamed for a lot in the Middle East, certainly by the Israelis. Do you have any feel for how complicated an operation this is and who might be able to mount it, or are we just blowing in the wind at the moment?
You're not blowing in the wind at all, Peter. This is so complicated an operation that one reason we weren't ready is that no one believed there was an organization with either the intention or the capability to execute something like this. People talk about bin Laden's group, but it's an umbrella group. It is the elements under it that would have had to do it, not bin Laden himself. We have talked about Iraq, but Iraq's operations have never been particularly sophisticated. We've talked about Iran, but while we can identify that the Iranian leadership was involved in Al-Khobar, we've never seen anything this ambitious. And groups outside the Middle East, like the Japanese Red Brigades, have never come close to this level of operation. I think it's also important to note that we talked earlier about bin Laden being Arab. Bin Laden's operations now have many elements that are not Arab. They are Islamist extremists. They involve groups from countries like Pakistan and other elements. And what we've never seen is a level of coordination among all of
our country on this day.